Okay, so to continue exploring the romance between Tess and Angel, finally Tess is noticed by Angel, and he asks her why she's drawing off, why she's walking off, and she admits that she has indoor fears. He says, "The milk turning sour? No. Life in general? Yes, sir. Ah, sir, mine very often. The hobble of being alive is rather serious, don't you think so?" And that begins a conversation about Tess's sad imaginings. Tess has these ideas. So, for example, the trees have inquisitive eyes, haven't they? And Angel is fascinated by Tess's sad imaginings, like these personifications in the trees and the river, who seem suddenly hostile and unfriendly. Interesting, isn't it, that just a moment ago Tess was enjoying the garden, but that the music actually made her cry, made her think of perhaps sad things. And she has this really glib musing of the numbers of tomorrows all in a line, the first and the biggest and clearest, the others getting smaller and smaller as they stand further away, but they all of them seem very fierce and cruel. Definitely overtones of Macbeth's speech about tomorrow there. The way he says, "Oh, Lady Macbeth has died. Tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow creeps his petty pace from day to day." And he expresses this sense of hopelessness once he's lost his love in that case, but it's definitely meant to refer to that quite glibly, but of course in Tess's own words. And then she says, "Well, you can raise up dreams of the music and drive such horrid fancies away." Okay, so he's surprised to find this young woman who, though but a milkmaid, had a touch of rarity about her that makes her shape such sad imaginings. And he says that they are like the ache of modernism. Okay, so he can recognise in her that she's having rather modern thoughts and feelings that intellectuals and poets are having, but she's milkmaid. But then he says, well, actually, isms are just sensations which men and women have vaguely grasped for centuries. So he's saying, well, maybe it's only natural to feel sort of sad, disappointed, apprehensive about life. And it's strange, he thinks, that they should come to her while yet so young. Yet more strange, it was impressive, interesting, and pathetic. Oh, nothing better than a sad girl, apparently, according to Angel, makes her pretty. And he doesn't guess the cause, and there was nothing to remind him that experience is as to intensity, not as to duration. Tess's passing corporeal blight had been her mental harvest. So what he can't work out is how she has these really glib, quite grey thoughts that seem to have altered her whole perception of life from one that was simple and optimistic to one that's more complex and at times pessimistic. Tess has had a brief but deeply traumatic series of experiences. They have changed her from a simple girl to a complex woman, as Hardy told us. Angel cannot imagine or perceive Tess's past suffering. Can't imagine it, can't perceive it. He just looks at the external and sees innocence. Hardy draws this limited and reductive male gaze to the reader's attention. He appears to be critiquing the love interest in his own story. Okay, I'm just going to point that out again. So Hardy is drawing Angel's limited and reductive male gaze to our attention because he wants us to critique Angel in this story. Okay, so we haven't got a simple hero in Angel. Hardy disapproves of some of Angel's thoughts. Okay, we've got some biblical allusion that I want to draw out for you here, which is so she's called the unhappy pilgrim, and there was very good reason for her to be sad. But how could this admirable and poetic man, that is Angel, ever have descended into the valley of humiliation, have felt with the man of Uz, she herself had many a day and night 2 or 3 years ago? My soul chooseth strangling and death rather than life. I loathe it, I would not live always. Rah, bleak stuff. He, the man from Uz is Job. I don't know if you've heard of Job. He's got a beautifully crafted poem found in the Bible and explores the nature and meaning of suffering and God's role in allowing it. Job suffered terribly. He loses all his children, loses all his land, he gets horrible boils and sores all over his skin, and he thinks, I just can't live forever, this is awful, I wouldn't mind dying. Tess is aligned with this biblical character, Job, another literary figure. It's very much a poem, a beautiful sort of philosophical musing on the nature of life. One of the oldest books in the Bible, we think. So she is aligned with Job, another literary figure for similar purposes. And the Valley of Humiliation here is actually a reference to John Bunyan's Pilgrim's Progress. If you've never heard of it, it's a seminal work in English literature. Have a look at it. Look it up. I'm sure you can find the e-text. The pilgrim in this story represents every man, and he's called Christian. It allegorizes, like Animal Farm, like Lord of the Flies to some extent, it allegorizes the pilgrimage of life on earth, full of trials. In the Valley of Humiliation, Christian meets the giant of despair. So Hardy is drawing out that in the Valley of Humiliation, where Tess was made pregnant by Alec, and she has the baby, and the baby dies, she feels a real deep despair. At any of those moments, she's really quite depressed. So interesting that Hardy uses these allusions as touchstones. It draws Tess into a wider discourse about the nature of human life and suffering and God's role in it. So I just wanted to draw your attention to the fact that Hardy is being really intentional about the religious aspects of Tess's moral quandaries. By contrast, Hardy aligns Angel with the biblical archetype of Abraham. I'm using the word archetype not because, Abraham might well be historical, but archetype in the sense that he becomes a model of a patriarch, and he is one of the patriarchs in the Jewish faith. So, like Peter the Great. So Peter the Great, basically, like a king who learns, or king in the making, who learns how to build ships. He's pretending to be lowly, but actually he's great. And he would become like an American or Australian Abraham, commanding like a monarch his flocks and his herds, his spotted and his ring straked, his men servants and his maids. It did seem unaccountable to her that a decidedly bookish, musical thinking young man should have been chosen deliberately to be a farmer and not a clergyman. So the archetype of Abraham, father of the Israelite nation, a patriarch, richly blessed in material and spiritual ways. He really did have a lot of flocks, herds, silver, gold, men servants and maids. Jacob is in the same archetype. He's actually Abraham's grandson, for Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Yeah. He's the one with the flocks and herds as well, and they're spotted and ring straked. If you look up the Jacob story, he almost gets cheated out of his inheritance by a wily father-in-law, but God restores a huge number of cattle to him, and particularly these spotted and striped sheep that he's been looking after for his father-in-law. And the father-in-law says, you can have all the spotted ones and I'll have all the white ones. But amazingly, and by a miracle of God, Jacob ends up with a massive flock of spotted sheep, and not very many white ones are left for the father-in-law, and the father-in-law's outraged. But it's a way of God restoring justice, because Jacob has been cheated by the father-in-law. So it's an image of being blessed materially, being really rich, being favoured. And Hardy uses these allusions to place Angel in a wider discourse about male privilege and owning the favour of God. So he places Angel in a wider discourse about male privilege and owning the favour of God. So whilst Angel is like an Abraham or a Jacob, chosen for God's purposes, chosen to prosper, Tess is like a Job, seemingly chosen to suffer. And this draws out some of that core idea that Hardy is tossing over, which is who decides our fate, who decides what we struggle, and what kind of cruel God would deal men like Angel a good hand and women like Tess a bad one. And he's also drawing out the fact that Abraham, Angel, Jacob, they're all men who enjoy the favour of God. And it's although Job is obviously man, actually I think he is drawing out how it's women who often suffer at the hands of society. Okay, fabulous. Well done, everyone. Look out for further videos and further assignments.